Gord Robertson was the puppeteer of Zoboomafoo, the talking lemur from the television show of the same name. He also played Bill, the psychotic ventriloquist dummy on the TV show Puppets Who Kill. I sit down with Gord Robertson to talk about his career that began as a puppeteer and soup performer on Fraggle Rock and continues to this day in TV shows and movies such as the recent thriller Come Play. It's all on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Gord Robertson, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. I usually start by asking, do you remember your first exposure to puppetry?
That's a darn good question. I think I'm slightly embarrassed to say that my first exposure was working with the Muppets. I mean, that's a pretty good exposure. But I hadn't really done any puppetry before then.
Do you remember seeing, like, growing up, any puppets on television or anything like that?
Well, of course I saw the Muppets on TV, and that was sort of... if you had told me I would be working for them, I just wouldn't have believed it, because they were pretty amazing and incredible and wonderful, and it was always a treat. I mean, I remember watching the Muppet Musicians of Brennan and Emmett Otter's Jug Band, and those were, for lack of a better word, magical. I mean, they were just stupendous. So, yeah, that was probably my first introduction. I mean, thinking back, I suppose. I should not forget things like The Friendly Giant, which was big, and Mr. Dress Up. I don't remember so much American stuff, except for the Muppets. That seemed to take puppetry to a whole different level. With all, and not to say that Mr. Dress Up and Friendly Giant weren't great puppets and great puppeteers. So,
when you were growing up, what sort of was your career goal? Was it to, like, be a performer, or was it something else? Or
I didn't. I played a lot of sports, and I loved hockey. So that would have been a dream. Although I'm only 5'4" and 130 pounds soaking wet, so hockey probably I wasn't gonna make it that way. Probably in grade 7 or 8. Yeah, grade 7 or 8, I had a drama teacher who was amazing, Sue Yendall, and that really lit the fire for me. And then when I went to York University for a year in their drama program, and when I was there, I forget why I was in one of my prof's offices, and she had a box of masks on her desk, and that drew me like nothing else. I couldn't explain it. It was like, what are those? And she sort of said, "Oh, those are masks. You'll find out about it in third year." But for lack of a better word, I won't say I was obsessed by it, but it just hit me. So yeah, that was the big spark. Those two things stand out.
yeah, and you studied at the Dell'Arte School, right?
Yeah, I went and did a workshop there, and that was great. Learned lots of really good stuff, and met some really interesting people from around the world, and yeah, great experience.
And you also studied a lot of mime work too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of consider that my main performance training. I did a year at the Mime School Unlimited with Ron East, and it was because I was interested in masks, and that's the only place I could find that taught mask work. And he taught Lecoq-based mask work, and that's kind of the basis of my puppetry too, where you're playing the mask, you're playing the puppet. You're really trying to make the puppet live, a living, breathing entity. So yeah.
And your first gig was with Fraggle Rock, your first puppetry gig.
Yeah.
How did that come about? How you had created a mime troupe that kind of got asked to be part, right?
Yeah, myself and Trish Leeper and Rob Mills had started our mime troupe, and we were going to change the world, of course, with mime, which is lofty goals. And Rob saw an ad in the paper for auditions at CBC with the Muppets, and God love him. I mean, I would have said, "Oh well, gee, somebody's going to be lucky." He put down the paper and picked up the phone and got us an audition, and so we went down, and we, really the theater gods were on our side because we walked in, and there were all of the luminaries of the mime world, and all working out. But the thing was, everybody was auditioning solo. So when it came to audition for the Gorgs, which was a trio, everybody who was auditioning tried to shine individually. Whereas the three of us, we worked together. And so they liked that. They liked the fact that two of us were short and one of us was tall. Rob was tall. And I think they also liked a little bit of our spirit. I mean, little things like, we showed up with a suitcase full of masks and props, and Rob was the first to go in. He went in, the door shut, and this is for the solo part of the auditions. And then he came out, and then Trish went, grabbed the suitcase, same suitcase, went back in, and door shut. And then she does her thing. She comes out, and they give me the suitcase, same suitcase. And I walk in, and Richard Hunt, who's leading the auditions, looks at me and goes, "Are you with them?" And and I say, "Yeah." And he says, "Oh my God, get out of here." I said, "Okay, well, thanks a lot. Had a great time." and started to go for the door. And he laughed and called me back. But I think they liked that kind of spirit, that we weren't easily cowed. Duncan Kenworthy, who was the producer, in reference to having two tall people and one short, he says to me from the front, they're all sitting at this long table, says, "How short are you?" To which I replied, "How tall am I?" A little chuckle. But I think those things stood us in good stead in terms of, I don't know, just the spirit, gentle but laughing spirit. And it was good. It was good.
Well, and it seems that's very sort of that Muppet sensibility too.
Yeah.
That, easygoing and playful and mischievous a little bit.
And don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
That I often tell a story of when we did all the individual auditions, then we did the group auditions, and when I said earlier, auditioning in threes, we worked together. They gave us a little routine. We did it together, making each other shine. And at the end, they called us up to the table, and the question was, so have you done big suits before? Because they were auditioning us for the Gorgs, for these big bodysuits. And Rob was first in the line, and he said, "Oh yeah, I worked with Bread and Puppet, and we did these big puppet things and whatever." And I'm thinking to myself, well, damn, I've never done puppets before. I've never done bodysuits before. I'm going to be sunk. They're going to hire those two, and they're not going to hire me. And so I'm starting to freak out. And then it gets to Trish, and they say, "Oh, have you ever done big bodysuits before?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I did this in Kensington Carnival and big this and big that." And I'm sitting there going, I am sunk. I've never done any of that stuff. I guess they want to know if we're strong enough because, being inside a suit is hard work, and it's you got to be strong. So, and they get to me, and all I can think of is, well, I haven't done puppets. I gotta tell them that I'm strong enough. So they get to me and they say, "So have you ever done any big puppet stuff?" And I said, "No, but I worked in a lumber mill once." And it was so out of left field, they just cracked. And but it was okay. It was good.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, that was one of the questions I had was, how heavy were those Gorg suits? Were those really a tank to
They,
move around?
they were luxury. I mean, compared to some of the suits that you see nowadays, and it's not because the suits nowadays are built poorly, but the suits that the Muppets built, the Gorg suits, were it was like a mesh with not flocking, with I want to like rugging material, but super light, and with a kind of a tutu underneath to give it volume, and then the same on top. So there are lots of air, lots of and the fabric was incredibly light. The hardest part to get used to was the head. It was a little bit forward heavy, so we put balancing weight on the back, and the human body isn't really meant to carry that kind of weight on the head, even a little bit. I mean, they were still pretty light. They were just big, but they were great. The hard thing was the vision for the first season. They used something called a fiber optic, and what it looked like, if you can imagine, if you've seen the vision of a bee, it's like all little octagonal strands. You're looking out through that, and it also, everything looked about 3 to 4 feet further away than it actually was.
Oh, geez.
So the learning curve was involved walking into a lot of walls.
Yeah.
But we got we at the beginning of the first 2 seasons, like I remember putting the suit, the head on for the second season and going, oh my God, how did I ever see in this? But you sort of got used to it. And then I think in the third season, or maybe halfway through the second, they got a camera in there, and that made a huge difference. That was great. But the suits were good. Yes, they were, if you're wearing a suit of that size, there's some weight, but they were very good. I think many suits now are using materials that maybe don't breathe as much or are slightly heavier just because of the nature of the material. And some of it comes down to money too. I mean, if you've got money, you can really build in those considerations, weight and the performer being able to see and breathe. Sometimes it's because of money or because of the nature of the suit and the illusion you're trying to create. The performer loses some of those things. So, I've seen some suits where breathing is a real challenge, and it's not the builder's fault. It's just that's the only way they could do it. So being inside a suit requires a tremendous amount of patience, and you got to be able to go to your Zen place because mostly it's not comfortable. Well, not mostly. It's not comfortable, and people forget. If you're good in the suit, people forget that often you can't see or that you can't breathe well, and that can be challenging.
So you were paired up with Jerry Nelson
Yep.
to perform Pa Gorg. Did you two have a lot of discussions about the character and his movement and what he would do?
We did. I mean, I leaned on Jerry for character, and then he would kind of ride. I felt, anyways, that he would kind of ride the wave of the movements that I was doing. Back and forth. I mean, in a suit work where somebody else is doing the voice, there is that kind of, you're kind of riding each other's rhythms, and I'm really listening to what he's doing. Of course, there's some talk beforehand, and then lots of listening. I'm listening to him. He's watching like a hawk what I'm doing, and it's really interesting. I mean, sometimes I could, I don't know how to describe it other than to say I could really just feel Jerry and feel his kind of flow in the whole thing, which is becomes a remarkable partnership. Very cool. And I mean, how lucky was I to be teamed up with Jerry Nelson in my first gig? I mean, holy smokes.
Yeah, not only working with the Muppets, but also with Jerry Nelson.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
such an awesome performer. I remember Dave Goles, who does among other things Gonzo. I remember watching watching him sitting in front of a monitor watching Jerry work, and Dave saying sort of quietly to himself about Jerry, just shaking his head and going, he has the most natural delivery, and that was Jerry. I mean, he could give you a complete character in one line, and
Yeah.
just from the vocal qualities. So yeah, I was really really blessed to work with him, and also the other thing about Jerry is when I think about it now, I don't. I remember him giving me so much room to do what I needed to do to take the scene, within the parameters that we've talked, to take it however I wanted to take it. He never micromanaged. And you know what? Given how experienced he was and how new I was, that would have been a real temptation. I mean, if I had somebody new and I was partnered with them, I could see that I might be a little bit all over them. It's like, do this, do this, do this, do this. Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing that I really appreciated about Jerry.
Yeah. Well, also on Fraggle Rock, you got hand puppetry training while you were working there, right?
Dude, I got everything training. No, seriously.
Yeah.
We did suits, we did hand puppets, we did even a little bit of like a tiny bit of marionette work. We did rod puppets, we did the little doozers, we did it like that. Really laid the base for my experience that then I got to do elsewhere and get better and better and better and better. It was an incredible. I knew at the time how lucky I was, but I didn't know how lucky I was. I didn't know how lucky I was until years later, and when I sort of looked back, and even now when I look back, I go, "Wow, I really hit the jackpot. I was so lucky."
Yeah. Well, you also worked on Follow That Bird. You were Daddy
Yeah,
Dodo
yeah.
on Follow That Bird. And you met Kermit Love on that shoot. What did you learn about performance from Kermit Love?
Kermit Love gave me one of the most wonderful single notes or feedback. He said after a take, he said, "You have no constancy," and I said, "Consistency?" He went, "No, constancy." He said, "You don't do the same thing twice." And I was in a suit again. So what it meant was, and the reason he was giving that note is because my vocal performer was depending on me to be constant, to do the same thing, or at least tell him if I was changing something, so that he could, change his performance if need be. I hadn't even thought about it with Jerry. I mean, I think that's how good Jerry was, that he would just go with the flow. But it was a really great note, and after that, I tried to watch, and it made me a little bit more constant and consistent, and it also made me get to my choices faster. There's not a lot of time in film and television, and with puppets, it can be often difficult to make the right choice right away. You think you have I think I have an idea to do how to do something. I get going, and then I realize that let's say this emotion that I have played 35 times directly to camera, when the camera is off to the side, it doesn't read the same. And so sometimes you can get not in trouble, but you make I'll make a choice that doesn't work out, so then I have to change it. Well, if you're working with a partner, that can be not always, but can be problematic. So it was it's a note that has or a critique that has stuck with me over the years, and I've tried to really pay attention to it. I liked Kermit lots. He was an interesting character, but great.
After working in a suit on Fraggle Rock and Follow That Bird, and then also doing some hand puppetry, did you kind of develop a preference of what you like to do, or did you were just like, I'd like to do it all?
Hand puppetry is a lot easier. I shouldn't say it's easier. It's easier on the body. And I quite liked hand puppetry. Just the more at the beginning, I was better at bodysuit work because I had done mask work. As I got better in technique with my hand puppetry, I grew to enjoy that more. But I'm still doing bodysuit work. I still quite enjoy it, but it can be quite challenging on the body. There's just no way around it, and it takes patience. I got hired on a gig. I'm not going to mention any names, partly because they had hired a guy, and when he realized what quote unquote working in a suit meant, like he was all good. He got the job. He got the great voice, and he was voicing the character. And then when he went for his first fitting, he had thought it might. I think he was thinking that it was like wearing a pair of, I don't know, a onesie pajamas or something like that. But when they started to measure him up for this big monster suit, he kind of stepped back and went, I can't do that. I'll die. And I give the dude huge credit for realizing his limitations and what he did and didn't want it to do. So they called me and I did it, and it was challenging. So to answer your question, the bodysuit work is tough, and hand puppetry is a little bit easier on the body.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, another thing I wanted to ask about was Short Circuit 2, because you worked on that, and we had Tim Blaney on the show, and he's talked about Johnny Five and stuff. But how was your experience working on Short Circuit?
It was great. I mean, I was working with Trish and Rob again. The three of us did the robot. I was in a telemetric suit doing the arms and waist, and Trish and Rob were doing the head. So that was, for me, it was very cool because I got to do this remote control rig with controlling Johnny Five's body and arms and hands. So from, just playing with technology, that was very cool. Ken Johnson, the director, was fantastic. And I felt really understood, the challenges of puppetry and making a puppet character come to life and be real. Sometimes you run into directors who don't quite get it, or they're not comfortable with it. Ken, he had such a great sense of humor and such a great sense of what the puppet could be. It made it a really wonderful working experience. And I was with Trish and Rob, so it's like we were a posse, so that was fantastic. And all effects, the guys who made the puppet, the robot, they were amazing. So yeah, good experience all around. And again, Jim Henson recommended us for the gig. Thank you again, Jim.
All right. Yeah. You can't get a better recommendation than that.
No.
For something puppet related.
No.
In 1988, you worked on Sesame Park, and you actually wrote on Sesame Park. What was the transition to start writing on the show?
I think it started out, Rob was always trying to write stuff and did write stuff. And he went off and formed his own company, Radical Sheep, and they did a lot of really great stuff. And they did Panda Bear Daycare and Rufus Tales. I forget what Rufus. Maybe it was just called Rufus. A bunch of stuff. So I think we started writing a couple, and then he started writing on his own, and I started writing on my own. It's actually there's a character on there that I'm really, I don't know if I should be proud of it, but I'm really delighted. Katie, the gal in the wheelchair, I think that's one of the first wheelchair or puppet wheelchair characters on TV. I believe CBC was the first to do it. So I have a tremendous amount of happiness over that, because that was my invention, quote unquote invention, to get a wheelchair, a puppet wheelchair character on TV. It was interesting. It was interesting, right? To write for CBC, lots of hurdles to go through because of educational needs and having to run things by, I think, a psychologist, and so that was new to me. I mean, I think that had been part of the landscape. I just had never run into it before, part of the writing landscape. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
I was going to ask about Katie, because that seems like it's a pretty, what was the development of that character? Did somebody ask for that character, or you were just like, hey, what if we did this?
No, nobody had asked for it. I was just trying to think of something to do that was interesting and something different. And I said to the director one day, Wayne Moss, said, what if we did, a disabled character? What if we did a wheelchair character? And he kind of looked at me and said, this is a great idea. And so we did it, and I think Trish ended up doing it, and they went through some changes and some development, and I think it ended up with Trish doing it, and I think Sandra Shamus might have done a first version. In any case, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, I was with Sesame Park for a while, and then I stopped writing for them. They got in a bunch of other writers, and then I think I moved on to other stuff. But I was very happy to have been able to contribute that. I thought it was a nice character. Aside from being in a wheelchair, I just thought the character was nice, an upbeat character, and I loved what Trish especially brought to the character. Very positive vibe.
Yeah, it's really great. When I read that you had come up with that, I was like, I definitely have to ask about that.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate that.
Amazing. You went on to work on the Jim Henson Hour.
Yeah.
And you played several characters there, including Lindbergh the Kiwi, Scruffy in Dog City.
Yeah.
And you actually, this was amazing because I did not know this. You originated the role of Chip, the Muppet Chip.
Yeah.
And so what was it, how was working on the Jim Henson Hour? It seemed like it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And again, I mean, I was with, was Trish on that? I don't know if Trish came on or not. Rob was there. And most of the old gang from or a lot of the old gang from Fraggle. So that was really nice. And kind of, what's the word? I'm going to use this word a lot. So blessed or so delighted that Jim had the confidence to say, here, do some characters. And I mean, hand puppet characters. We'd done the Gorgs and we'd done some background characters, but to be actually given a character was like, holy mother of goodness, And so that was fantastic. And to try and do something with Chip, who was a pretty odd character and fun. And Lindbergh was a real challenge because of the beak. You put Lindbergh in a crowd scene with characters and ask them to look left to right, and Lindbergh's beak has to go. If he's looking straight forward, it has to go up to the sky, over somebody's head, and then come back down to look from left to right. And here's a trivia thing for you: Dog City. Look for the character who takes a pool shot and sinks the ball. That was me. Am I delighted that I could do that? I took the shot, and I'm below the table with a pool cue in the puppet's hands, run by a rod. I took the shot, and then it was only in the playback that I realized it had gone in. It was like, what? I sunk the ball.
I'm a great puppeteer. I can do this all the time.
I can play pool. Yeah. No, I mean, this is like nerding out on puppetry, but if you're a puppeteer, those kinds of things make your day.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the puppets you performed in Dog City was Scruffy.
Yep.
And Scruffy is sometimes, I don't know if currently right as we're recording this, but is on display in the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta.
Awesome.
Have you ever been down there to visit him and
No,
see that display?
I didn't know that. Okay, I'll see you later. I'm on my way. No, I had no idea. I'll have to go check it out. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I just it's kind of cool to have a puppet you've performed on display there at the center. Yeah. So obviously on the Jim Henson Hour, you worked closely with Jim Henson, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and what did you learn about puppetry just from being near him and working with him and
oh my God,
seeing him perform?
That's a big question. I mean, the short answer is everything. You know, I mean, I don't even know how to answer that one. That's such a big. What did you learn from your mom and dad? I mean, to put it like that, like Fraggle Rock was his. Here's the thing. I'm going to answer this maybe in a weird way. So I heard, and maybe you've heard this story too. I heard the story that in one of the early meetings for Fraggle Rock, Jim said, "Let's make a show that will end all war." And everybody laughed. Oh, that's hilarious. That's a great idea. That's so funny. Okay, so what are we going to do? And then he was like, "No, let's make a show that'll end all war." Like he was dead serious. And when you work with a guy like that, maybe you can't say, "Oh, I learned this one." You can't put your finger on something. But that vibe, the great people that he attracted around him, that's like, in a way, that's deeper learning than any puppet thing he could have taught me. I think that's the thing that aside from all the puppetry stuff, and that I learned every day that I was on set, from him, from Dave, from Jerry, from Karen, from Kathy, from Richard, from any of the puppeteers who came in, the Henson puppeteers. I learned something every day. Kevin Clash. But from Jim, and Jim as well, that underlying humanity and desire for peace and the goodness of people, that's, I think, was the profoundest thing that I learned from him.
Well, that's incredible. It's such so amazing that you get to work with him and work with him closely and learn from him. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you also got to work with another puppetry or showbiz legend in Shari Lewis.
Yes.
And you worked on 2 shows with her, Lamb Chops Play Along and Charlie Horse Music Pizza.
Yes.
Which is a mouthful to say. What was it like working with Shari? And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked about Jim. What did you learn about the business and about show business and working with so closely with Shari Lewis?
Shari was amazing. And I came along at a good time. I had a skill set that they wanted. And again, I sense of humor. You got a sense of humor that goes a long way, man. So one of the things I liked about Shari was her approach to comedy. And she had a very, I'm going to say, scientific approach to comedy. I'd do something or I'd say something, and she'd say, completely deadpan, with a straight face, she'd go, "That's hilarious." And it was like, it wasn't like she was laughing and falling over. She was analyzing it and looking at it from a very kind of unemotional, it sounds too dry, but I just loved the way that she just looked at it and went, "Yep, that's hilarious." There was in the same vein as the Muppets. There was magic in what she did, and I loved that. So yeah, I loved working for Shari. I got along great with her and Mallory and Pat Breimer, who was her master puppeteer, who was, I thought, a bit of a genius at especially his invisible rigging, where he could get the puppet to do stuff and you would not see any rods or strings anywhere. He was very good, especially with string rigging. Recently passed away. God, may he rest in peace. But really, really, really fine puppeteer and just a great guy. And a style of puppetry of hand puppetry that was quite different than the Muppets. Similar but different. But yeah, I really, really liked working with her. Because she came from kind of a vaudeville tradition, and I loved that. That's that. When I say, she would look at something and go, "Oh, that's hilarious." That was like I could feel the vaudeville coming through the way they would break something down and look at it, and yeah, it was good. It was really good.
You also worked on a Henson show that I think a lot of people don't know about, called The Brats of the Lost Nebula.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did you get involved in that show? And I would love for you to talk about it, just because the puppets were different. You're talking about a different style of puppets. They were different again.
Brats of the Lost Nebula was when I went to audition for that. That was the first time I met Bill Barretta, who is a phenomenal puppeteer. Really, I almost want to say fierce. But really, really strong and really solid in his choices. And it was a very interesting show. These puppets, which were kind of rod puppets, kind of animatronic. Well, they did have animatronics in them. We had they were held out in front, but they were heavy enough that we had I think it was a Delron or nylon rod that went into a belt at our back over our shoulder to kind of suspend the puppets in front of us, and they were a challenge to control because they were suspended like that. They could bobble easily, but very, very interesting puppetry challenge. And I think after that show, I came to really like the combination actually of hand puppet and animatronic together. I thought that was a really good combo. I don't know conceptually if it really succeeded. It didn't last long, but very interesting project, and very interesting puppetry to try and wrap your head around. So yeah, and such a delight to work with Bill. Yeah, who I had not met before.
Yeah, the puppets, they have some of the puppets for that on display at the Henson lot. Mm-hmm. And they're always interesting to look at because you just think like, okay, how did this work?
And,
but then all the level of detail on them as well, like the clothing is just, they're really incredible puppets.
Yeah, the Henson workshop doesn't turn out anything subpar, man. It's all good stuff.
Well, I, of course, have to ask you about Zaboomafoo.
Yes.
Because that is legendary. So what was it like? Because I may have heard a little, rumblings about this, but having a puppet with live animals, how did that work out?
It was really interesting, and it could be challenging, and it could be a little bit scary. I never felt like I was in danger, and that was because the animal wranglers were very good. Having said that, there were a couple of times. I think one of the first animals they brought on. So I have to back up. So when I did Zaboomafoo, I did most of it lying on my back with my arm reaching to the ceiling, and so at a 90-degree angle to my body, so that Zabu could look like he was sitting on the floor or close to. It wasn't like there was a raised set. We were on a concrete floor, and I was lying down most of the time. So the first animal they brought on was a porcupine. Great. A porcupine in heat. Not so great. So I'm lying down with the puppet, and the porcupine in heat waddles up my body and latches onto my arm. And everybody thinks this is hilarious. And I say, no, get the porcupine, get the Randy porcupine off my arm. Because if he loses his grip, he's falling backwards on my stomach. And that will not be fun.
Yeah.
They had a cheetah on, and they wanted the cheetah to kiss Zabu. So what do? They put tuna juice on the puppet's nose. At which point all my puppetry friends are going, wait a second, so you got lunch, your hand is lunch and they're putting tuna on it? And it was all good. But then they let the cheetah wander around. And so, like 10 minutes later, I'm lying on my back, setting up a shot, and I feel the cheetah licking my hair from behind. And I'm sitting there going, okay, don't freak out. Freaking out would be bad. It's just a big wild cat that you have your back to, which is really bad. And then the cheetah is, like, seriously licking my hair hard. And I'm, okay, I'm a guy. I can be cool with this. And then the cheetah's chewing my hair. At which point I say, excuse me, the cheetah's chewing my hair. Is that a good thing? And they come over and they move the cheetah. I have lots of good animal stories, being under the set when the baby skunks decide to test their early warning system and getting just totally gassed out. The elephant that I'm leaning against, there's the wall, there's me, and then elephant. And I'm leaning over the elephant to try and so that you can see Zabu sitting on his back. And then I notice I'm getting closer and closer and closer to the wall, like I'm going to get crushed. And I say, I think the elephant's moving me to the wall. Can you check that out? And the trainer looks at me and goes, oh, are you leaning on the elephant? I said, yeah. Yeah, they like to lean back. Oh, good to know. So lots of good Zaboomafoo stories. In terms of danger, there was only... the animal trainers were very good at kind of sussing out if an animal was going to be a problem. Like I remember Dale Janau was his name, the head guy, taking the stunt. We had a stunt Zabu puppet, and taking it in to show 2 tigers that were guests, and the tigers immediately sort of lashed at the puppet, and Dale bopped it in the nose and made this sound, which is what is, I guess, standard practice to get the tiger to back off, and held out the puppet again, and the tiger did it again, and Dale calmly turned around and walked back and said, yeah, you won't be getting close to the tigers. He was basically seeing how interested they were.
Yeah.
And then the other story I can tell is they brought a cougar on. And I knew this cougar because a buddy of mine, a very good puppeteer by the name of Frank Meschkuleit, had also auditioned for the show. And he had worked with this cougar. And they had given him a puppet which wasn't nearly as realistic as the puppet they used to audition with. And the cougar, Frank brought out the puppet. The cougar immediately slapped both paws, one on each side of the puppet's head. And Frank said he could feel the claws coming through the head of the puppet. So I knew this cougar. So they put the cougar in place, and they put the camera in place. And what they wanted me to do was they wanted me to walk up to the camera and lie down so that the camera is looking over Zaboomafoo's shoulder to the cougar. And I had a line to say. So I put the puppet behind my back, and I walked out, and I said, are you rolling camera? And they said, we're rolling. I lay down, I pulled the puppet out, and as soon as I pulled the puppet out, the cougar's head snapped around. Saw the puppet. I immediately said my line, finished my line, pulled the puppet down. The animal trainer stepped in front in between us, and I walked off set. That was it, one take. They were not, I mentioned those two, we had a couple of tigers on, and to keep them entertained, we were throwing them basketballs and soccer balls, and they were catching them, and instantaneously, as they caught it, they deflated it with their claws because they're so strong.
Yeah.
And these were, teenage 200-pound tigers. So, yeah. But the whole crew was very aware of this. I mean, I tell the story about they brought this yak on set. And, the yak was very docile, very calm. And everybody was working around this yak. This is a big animal with big horns. And everybody's working really close around the yak. And then the yak calmly decided that it would like to leave. And so he calmly moved forward and broke the big oak doors into the studio. Just plowed through them. And after that, everybody gave the yak a whole lot of space.
Yeah. So. It's not just a cow.
No.
And even a cow can be dangerous.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I love it because I think a lot of times, it sounds like, a lot of times as performers and puppeteers, we get into situations where something isn't necessarily right, but you're kind of like, well, I don't want to say anything because it'll slow down production. And it seemed like definitely in this show, you were like, no, listen, hey, we got to stop because we got to fix this or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we were very good, not pretty good. They were very good safety-wise. And, there were a couple of moments that were, I don't know if you remember the barrel that that Zabu used to sit on top of. Well, in order for Zabu to sit on top of the barrel, I have to put my whole body inside the barrel. So it's cramped. So, okay, that's part one. Part two is they brought in this snow leopard to work. And often what they would do is they would let the animal, whatever animal was there during the day, they'd let the animal roam around the set during lunchtime when the crew had lunch. And so they'd get a lot of extra footage. So after lunch, I come in and the first scene up is Zabu sitting on the barrel. So I get in the barrel and put my arm up and they put Zabu on. And then they let the snow leopard out. Well, what nobody told me was that during lunch, the snow leopard had taken to hiding inside the barrel. So suddenly I turn around and there's this snow leopard wanting to get in the barrel with me. Like, how about what? Hi! This is awkward. This is the same snow leopard that did a vertical leap of 12 feet over the interior studio wall and landed beside Joan Parkinson, who was taking care of Zabu, who was Zabu's wrangler, as she was sewing something. She was a little surprised.
Yeah, that's a good wake me up right there.
Oh yeah.
Well, another show I wanted to ask you about, and I'm so bummed that I came late to this show and I didn't know. I think I may have heard about it, but I didn't watch it. But is Puppets Who Kill?
Yeah.
And it's so great because I don't know if the legality of this, but a lot of them are on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so I've been watching them. And you played Bill the ventriloquist dummy.
Yeah.
And was that puppet rigged similar to a hand puppet, or did it have like ventriloquist controls?
That was an actual ventriloquist dummy, which was that was a fantastic show for me because I up until then I had been given a lot of sort of young, earnest character roles. And that was the opposite. And also it was a real challenge because the controls, I mean, there were a lot of controls in there in that puppet. It was also a challenge because if you think about the mechanics, think of the controls all being on a broomstick. So the ventriloquist is sitting on the ventriloquist dummy is sitting on the ventriloquist's knee or a stool or being held, but the arm is kind of, let's say, parallel to the floor. So and think about little levers inside on a broomstick that you're pulling towards the broom handle. Now, if you're making that into a hand puppet where we're lying on the floor and I'm lifting my arm up over my head, suddenly the body mechanics of the wrist to the broomstick are completely different. So I taped, because it was an actual dummy that had some historical value, I taped a piece of wire that I could rest the puppet on. So I could put my hand inside and the wire would not interfere with mechanics, but it would rest on my second finger from my baby finger, and carry the weight so that I could use the other three fingers, thumb and two fingers, to work the mechanics. I hope that makes all sense for all those who are trying to visualize. Long story short, one of my fingers was, because of the weight, was numb for about 6 months after doing that show every season. But that's the only way I could deal with the change in mechanics of having a puppet being held in front of you at, let's say, chest height, versus holding a puppet that was made to be held that way and moving it up overhead. It changes the body mechanics quite a bit. And that's, you know what, as kind of a sidebar, it's one of the things that I became really interested in, and I think most puppeteers are quite aware of, especially in film and television work, is body mechanics. What are you doing to your body? What kind of contortions are you doing in order to get a performance? And how a slight change in the body mechanics can make a huge difference. You know, small story. Steve Whitmire, Muppet fame, did Kermit for many years. Really an amazing performer. One of the times that I went down to work with Shari Lewis, I was in town. I think I was only in town for 3 days or something like that, because I had another gig. I can't remember. Anyways, I remember I was there for a short time, and in that short window, I got a phone call from Steve, who I had never in my life gotten a phone call from. And he said, Gord, I hear you're working with Shari Lewis. And I said, yeah, how'd you know that? And I don't even remember what he said. He said, can I come watch? And I'm like, sure, I'll run it by Shari, but I'm sure it would be fine. So he came and watched, and he was just a huge puppet fan and was really curious. When he was in the studio, Shari was doing something, and he walked over to me and he whispered quietly, get her to move the monitor over. It'll be easier. And I looked and I saw, and he was completely right. By moving the monitor 6 inches, it changed her body mechanics, and suddenly it was a little bit easier. And she said, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so yeah, that was a bit of a sidebar there, but
no. Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, I want to get back to Puppets Who Kill, because I do have a few other quick questions. But you have a website called puppetsandpilates.com.
Yep.
That is your website, and you talk about how you started taking Pilates to realign your body after years of doing this work. And I was going to ask, why is a good exercise or stretching routine, why is that good for a puppeteer to start and to keep up on?
Puppetry, point one is puppetry is physically demanding. It can be very physically demanding. And if you're doing film and television work, you're often in weird and uncomfortable positions. I once did a shot in Zaboomafoo with my legs over my head in the plow position, in the yoga plow position. I don't know if I can explain this one for people to visualize, but I won't lose the point of why to do a physical routine. There was a cave opening, and they wanted Zabu to sit in the cave entrance. How do you do that when I'm lying down? Like, there's nowhere, I can't be standing below the floor. To make a long story short of the body mechanics, the only way I could do it was to do a shoulder stand, to get my body close to the wall walk my feet up the wall so it was on my shoulders, and then the puppet could be seen sitting with my elbow on the floor. That's not the plow one. That was for a shot where I couldn't get that was the only way I could get my body out of shot. Anyways, so it's physically demanding, and if you're doing again, and I keep saying film and television because that's the majority of my career, well, almost the entirety. Most puppeteers are dominant on one side, so right hand dominant. So for me, I was right hand dominant, and my shoulders angled up to the right, my hips angled down to the left, my something else was out of whack. My spine was one way, and I had a chiropractor say, you know what, I can adjust you and that'll get it back to normal, but you need to do a weight routine to build up strength to support you and to support all of these changes. So I would say as a general idea, any kind of physical routine that strengthens and stretches is good for maintaining the physicality of puppetry, and it's also great for countering any negative effects, and it's also just a really great way to learn about the body. And so much of puppetry is mimicking body movement. You should know your body. So those are all good reasons.
Excellent. I love it. Well, I want to go back to Puppets Who Kill just for a second here. Watching a few episodes on YouTube and you talking about the controls and how they worked, you certainly got so much mileage out of Bill too, and all those controls. One of my favorite things is there was a scene where he's drinking a slushie and one of his eyes is sort of squinting like you would if something was cold. And it's like just that little detail just killed me. I just thought it was so brilliant. What I want to ask is that show had puppets interacting with humans and out and about in the world.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite shots that you pulled off during Puppets Who Kill that you were like, yeah, I'm glad we got that?
I forget who it was with, but I was inside a shopping basket. And Bill was, I think, maybe pushing the shopping basket. I can't even remember. I just remember being stuck inside a shopping basket. I remember working with Gordon Pinsent, which was like, that was a dream. At one point, I walked up to him, and he was sitting at this boardroom table. And I walked up to him, and just as a kind of, I wasn't really thinking much other than just like saying hi. I put Bill's hand on his shoulder, and he was like, "Oh, that's good. That's good." Like he was in the scene. And I thought, that's fantastic. So yeah, it was great for that. It was great for the acting challenges that it offered up. In terms of, we did little cheats, like there's a scene where Bill has to grab I don't know if I should tell this one. I guess well, there's a scene where Bill had to grab a mug out of somebody's hand, and we couldn't figure out how to do it. So I said to Vicky Veenstra, who was the puppet wrangler, she had small hands. I said, make up your hand like Bill's. And so it's a quick shot. And so she kept her hand, all the fingers together and stiff, and she reached in and grabbed the mug out. And, you buy it. What else? I'm trying to think. What other really, if there was any cool, off the top of my head, I can't think of any. Those are the two that come to my head.
Well, it's a fantastic show. I hope people check it out because I'm loving going through with the ones that are on there because it's a lot of fun. It
is a lot of fun, and as I say, it was a really nice character for me, and a puppetry challenge, and also the acting challenges were great. And Dan Redican does a great job of acting with the puppets. Really great cast all around.
And I'm sure it was fun, too, to go from doing sort of all these kids shows or family-friendly shows
Absolutely.
to go to this show that was more adult.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question about that. It was, and that's I think what I'm alluding to when I say the acting challenges, the more adult themes and not just everybody happy all the time, which can be a downside, not always, but can be a downside of some kids TV. Um, I had to do a scene where this is a bit macabre, but where Bill invites somebody over to eat him, and that was based on a real thing that happened in Germany. And so that was it was an interesting acting challenge. Yeah, it was fun, 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 fun.
Well, you've done a lot of things. I wanted to touch. We can't touch on them all during this interview, but in 2020, you worked on a movie called Come Play.
Yes.
That was released. It was sort of a monster movie or suspense thriller with a creature in it. You were the wrangler on that film, and what were your responsibilities as the wrangler?
So yeah, that I got called late to that one, and so they had already crewed up, but they said, "Well, you know what? If you want to come wrangle, there might be some puppetry days." And I said, "Well, it's puppets. You want me to wrangle? I'm happy to wrangle." And so I went and wrangled, and it was just some of it was mechanical. So they had steel rods and collets for rods, and so was wrangling those. Some of it was ended up being, and this was actually very fun for me, just being an outside eye when they were rehearsing stuff. Some of it was I got to do a little bit of puppetry, so that was fantastic. Some of it was sliming the puppets, just sort of general maintenance of the puppet, maintenance of the puppeteers. Anything that needed to be done, I was like, yeah, I'm in. Whatever you need me to do. And one of the Andy Hayward was on it, and Russ Walko, and Marty Stelnick, and they were a really great group of guys. And I remember one night giving Marty the most obscure note. He was doing the walk. It was the walk around the outside the parking booth, and he was walking, and it was there, but it wasn't there. And I said, Marty came up and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's there, but it's not there." He said, "I said as I'm looking at it, I can't think of what else I would do." And then I sort of went, "But you know what? I think maybe," and I can't remember exactly the note I gave, but it was something like, "I think maybe you need to walk from the back legs." Or I gave him some really obscure note, and he kind of went, "Okay." And then he went and he did it. And he came back and he was like, "That worked." And I was like, "Yeah." So that's really fun when you get that kind of openness of collaboration when your fellow performers are like, "Yeah, I'll try it on." And when they can, like, that's a skill level that's quite remarkable. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Great to work with Russ, who I hadn't worked with before, and Andy. I think I had worked with Andy before. Always a great guy. So good team, and I sort of got off topic of what exactly I did there, but yeah, just take care of the puppet, take care of anything to do with the puppet, preparing things. If you know the puppet has to do something in the next scene, making sure that that's ready, because it's often a change of hand or a change of a part of a puppet, or maybe a whole, instead of on many shows there's two or three or four different versions of a puppet, so maybe you need the different puppet ready. So I would be responsible for all of that stuff.
Well, doing you talked about the rigging that you did on Bill, to make that work, and working on this. Are you a builder at all? Have you built puppets?
I've never considered myself a builder. I do when I'm not puppeteering. For the last 5 years, I've been working in a shop called Mindwarp Productions. They do a lot of stuff. They did the Hannibal series. They've done I think most of the Saw films. I met Francois Dagenet, who's the boss, and Tennille Shockey, who is his main partner. on Hannibal. And to make a long story short, they said, Francois said, "Do you want to come try working in the shop?" And I said, "Well, I don't have the skill set, but sure." And so I went, and I consider myself sort of general labor, but I've picked up a lot of stuff, and I would never bill myself as a builder, but I can do a certain amount of stuff, and I have a certain. Here's the thing: I've been working in film and television for I think it's like 38 years now. So between that and working in the shop and just doing it for long enough, you pick up lots of stuff. So I think you'll find that many puppeteers who, even if they don't consider themselves builders, are still pretty handy and can come up with a lot of stuff. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, as we wrap up here, I always like to ask, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Oh my God, I can't. I don't think I could give one answer to that. There's been so many. I just have been remarkably lucky and met so many fantastic people. I mean, that's the highlight. Is the people. That really is the highlight. And I come back to Jim again, and his, whether you call it a talent or his vision of just the people he attracted around him. He's such a great team. I've recently been working at Tele Française Ontario, and the people there, again, we were doing a puppet production there. They're just great people. That was a highlight. Performing a character in French. I'm not bilingual by any stretch of the imagination. Performing a bodysuit in French on a show called Le Monde Magique de Lorenzo. And that was a highlight. Working with the Muppets, highlight. Shari Lewis, highlight. And on and on and on. And I hate to say those because it leaves out so many. But the people is it's just, and having the, going to use that word again, the blessing, and I'm not a religious guy, the blessing or the honor or the privilege or whatever you want to say, to be able to work in the arts, to be able to pay the rent by working in the arts is amazing. It's just fantastic. And you know what? I'll tell you what the highlight is. The highlight is when I go into schools, I'll go into high schools or public schools, mostly high schools, and teach puppetry workshops. When students come up and say, "You did Zaboomafoo? Oh my God, that was my childhood. You don't understand." That is such a privilege. And there you go. I mean, that's a highlight.
Yeah. Gord, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Grant, you know what? You asked me what highlights are. Highlights are these kinds of things. Thank you so much for being interested in my work and being interested in talking to me. That is, that really does the heart good.
Big thanks to Gord Robertson for being on the show. For links to some of the things we talked about, check out the show notes for this episode number 59, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear even more of my talk with Gord, download the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android and click on the gift icon in the listing for this episode. Special thanks to Russ Walko for his help in this episode. Well, now it's time to announce the winner of episode 58's giveaway for an official Under the Puppet puppeteer headband. The question was, which celebrity did Mike Quinn blow off during his first visit to the set of The Muppet Show? And the answer was Wonder Woman herself, Linda Carter. And the winner is Krister Strand. Congratulations, Krister. Your headband is on the way. This episode, we are giving away a set of 3 pins that were inspired by the doodles of Jim Henson. These pins were a holiday gift to friends of the Jim Henson Company and are stamped with the official logo of the Jim Henson Archives. I'll post a picture of this pin set in the show notes for this episode. To be entered to win this Jim Henson Doodle pin set, simply answer this question from the episode you just heard. What did they put on the Zaboomafoo puppet's nose to try and entice a cheetah to give him a kiss? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by May 15th, 2021. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the June 1st, 2021 episode of the show. 1 entry per household. Good luck. I would like to send a special thank you out to all of the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Vicky Sebring, Jamie Donmeyer, David Akers, Tony Urbano, Kathy Crawford, Eve Cunning, and my great aunt, Dorothy Bachoco. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604. Or click on the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can send them via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Twitter by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staber and features music by Dan Ring. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons get new episodes before they are released, behind-the-scenes information, and exclusive bonus episodes. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2020 Saturday Morning Media Grant Bachoco Executive Producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.